From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got a great guest coming in. It's a first-time guest coming in from Puerto Rico, although he used to live in San Diego. His name is Sam Wolanyk, and he actually is quite well known. If you remember a few years ago, someone tried to go through the TSA pretty much almost naked, and actually a few times, and caused quite an uproar. That was him. Actually, I'll play a clip of one of the mainstream fake news channels' stories on it right now.
Welcome back. Our next guest upped the ante on the TSA. To show he had nothing to hide, he stripped down to his underwear. The TSA laughed and then arrested him. Now the TSA has threatened to fine him $11,000 for not completing their security screenings. Joining us now from San Diego is Sam Wolanyk. Sam, thanks for joining us and welcome to Freedom Watch. What happened to you the other day at the San Diego airport? Tell us in your own words.
Well, I went to the X-ray scanner, placed all my my bag and my jacket and my shoes on the conveyor, and then approached the metal detector. They asked me to go through the scanner, which I refused, and then they informed me that I was going to be patted down. So I went to the pat-down area, and the gentleman there was explaining what he was about to do, and I pulled off my shirt and my pants and set them on the table next to him and stood there with my hands at my side.
And this was in full view of other passengers trying to get through this security area.
Yes.
And what happened next?
Well, the TSA agent chuckled because it was kind of absurd, and he called his supervisor over, and the supervisor came over and told me to put my clothes back on or he was going to call the harbor police. And I said, you can call them, but I haven't committed any crimes. This is not indecent exposure. I'm not exposing anything. I'm not trying to elicit any sort of a sexual arousal response in anyone or anything like that. So I understand that you have to make sure that I'm not carrying any weapons or explosives, and you can do that. And he didn't like that answer, so he called the harbor police.
And what did the harbor police do? Arrested you in your underwear?
Well, it eventually got to that. They showed up, first 2, then 4, then 6, and they read me an admonishment that I was going to be arrested if I didn't complete the process. And I told them that I was not refusing the process. I invited them to pat down any anomalies that they saw in my clothing.
All right, Sam, I assume that you were trying to point out the absurdity and the unconstitutionality of what they were doing to you and to your fellow customers, and that's why you removed your trousers and your shirt.
Well, Judge, really, I was just trying to get to Barbados. And I had...
Did you make it to Barbados?
Frequently.
I'm assuming you didn't if they arrested you.
No, sir.
So as you can see, very interesting. He actually told me before that was back in the old days when he was a little bit more naive and thought he could change the system and things like that. He's since just escaped the USSA, lives in Puerto Rico, and we're going to ask him all about everything he's been doing. But the first thing I got to ask you, Sam, is how did you become an anarchist?
Wow, well, Jeff, I've been, I know you always ask that question, and I think it's a really good one. I like to think that I came by it honestly. But I remember back when I was in 8th grade in civics class to memorize all the amendments as part of the class. And I remember like coming to the Second Amendment and being like, right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So does that mean that you can just walk around with a gun? No. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense because that's what it says. And that got me into, some interesting conversations. And I started, even back then, started suspecting that things weren't quite what they seemed. And then as I got a little bit older, I got into politics a little bit. I was a Republican because that made more sense to me than being a Democrat. I kind of believed what they were talking about. And then I got involved with the Ron Paul campaign. And that was probably when I first had my first real inkling that something wasn't right, when I saw the way he got treated behind the scenes and learned that the Republicans would rather lose with Mitt Romney and keep the game going than win with Ron Paul and have everything change. So after that, I've always been a big Second Amendment guy, big gun rights guy, and I got into some activism there. My younger brother and I basically started the open carry movement down in San Diego. I got arrested for doing that. I didn't break any laws, but as the police told me when they arrested me for doing nothing, we don't care if this is legal, you can't do it. So I ended up in a lawsuit with the city of San Diego, and we won, and they paid a $35,000 settlement, which was a big black eye to them. And again, I was pretty naive. I thought that this was the way that things were done, and that I was, kind of home free. And then the TSA started their porno scanner program, and started, giving people the option to you either have to be sexually molested or irradiated if you want to get on an airplane. And I was on a trip to Barbados and decided that I wasn't going to have any of that. And so I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and flip-flops and a pair of boxer briefs. And they told me to go through the scanner, and I said no, and they said, okay, you're going to be patted down, please step over here. And I did, and then I just whipped off my jeans and my t-shirt and stood there. And the TSA guy, kind of flipped out and called a supervisor, and the supervisor told me to get dressed. And I said, well, I understand that you guys need to make sure that I'm not carrying any guns, bombs, knives, drugs, anything like that, and now you can do that. Do whatever you want with my clothes, irradiate them, put them in a microwave oven, whatever, but there's no need for you to actually put your hands on me. You can see everything you need to see. And they called the police, and then they said, the head TSA guy says, I know. Put your clothes back on, then we're going to pat you down. And I used some colorful language, but it was basically said that I'm not going to get dressed just so you can put your hands on me. And they said, well, you're under arrest. I said, for what? They said, for not completing the process. I said, okay, can I put my pants back on now? No. So they handcuffed me and walked me through 2 airport terminals in my underwear. It was pretty hilarious. And then in the end, they didn't charge me with anything because I hadn't actually done anything. And it was a short time after that I got arrested again for open carry. At the time in California, there was this strange statute where you could only carry a weapon if it was openly carried and unloaded. I know that's silly, but that's the way it was in California. You could carry loaded magazines, but not a loaded gun. The police were about to do a thing called a 12031 e-check, where they would take your weapon out of the holster and make sure that it was unloaded. And if it was unloaded and you were in compliance with the law, you were supposed to be able to go free. Well, I got e-checked by a sheriff's deputy, and and of course I passed the check because I knew the law. And then he told me that he had to ID me, and I said, well, California doesn't have a stop and ID law. So he said, well, I have to write a report, whatever. I wouldn't identify myself, so he arrested me for that and said I was obstructing an officer or something silly like that. This ended up going to court, and he wrote in his report that at the point that he took my weapon out of the holster, he saw that I was carrying a pocket knife, because there's a little clip that clips onto your jeans pocket. And he thought that was a switchblade, and this is why he elected to continue the contact. So we get into court, and I'm like, okay, I've got this guy. I have him dead to rights. I filed a motion to suppress the evidence based on it being a false arrest, which is called, I think it's a 1538. I get into court, get this guy on the stand, and I said, Officer McFriendly, whatever his name was, you testified that at the point you had my gun out of the holster, you saw something that made you think I was carrying a switchblade. And he said, that's correct. I said, okay, and a switchblade under California law is either a misdemeanor or a felony, which is pretty serious. And he said, that's right. I said, in that case, why did you give me my gun back? The one thing you're not going to do as a police officer when you have someone in front of you that you think is a felon. Give him his gun back. So I figured that I had this guy, and that I caught him in this great lie. And he said, well, that was the safest place for it. And I said, safer than tucking it into your waistband, putting it in your patrol car, throwing it 50 feet away, giving a 45 caliber automatic back to a guy that you think is a felon. That's the safest thing you can do. He said, yeah. And I said, Your Honor, motion to dismiss. And the judge says, sounds like a good arrest to me. And at that point, that was when I became an anarchist, because I knew I mean, basically what happened is they said, well, this is that Sam Wolanyk guy that's making us look stupid, so this is our chance to railroad him. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it's all part of the same system, as you now know. The judge, the police, the government, they're all on the same team. So they just do whatever they want, really. And some people think, oh, well, we have some say. We can maybe go to court and plead our case. Well, we just shouldn't have those courts. It should be private courts. It should be private security on the airlines. You know, it was only like 30 or 40 years ago that you could actually take a rifle onto a plane. Doug Casey was telling me that. That was a little bit before my time. But in the U.S., it was quite normal just to take your rifle onto the plane, and no problems ever happened on the planes because people actually were armed.
Yeah.
Not saying that that's the best solution, but the free market would figure out a much better solution than any government solution, of course, and that's what you're trying to point out with the TSA. The one thing that I noticed recently, I don't know if you noticed this, or you might have, I'd be surprised if someone didn't tell you. First of all, Tim Allen, the Tool Man comedian guy, came out and said he was an anarchist, but I just saw like a week or two ago, Judge Reinhold, who's another actor, went through and caused a calamity at the TSA, and it looked like on purpose. You can kind of tell by how he was like smiling at the cameras. But he kind of did something similar to you. Were you aware of that?
No, I haven't heard of this. Tell me.
Yeah, well, that's basically the story. I'll see if our video guy can find the video of it right now.
That's actor Judge Reinhold in police custody Thursday night. Reinhold is best known for his role in Beverly Hills Cop.
Drop it!
And Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Mister, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna kick 100% of your.
He was also the close talker from a classic Seinfeld episode.
Oh. How about you, Jerry?
Thursday night, Reinhold was charged with disorderly conduct at Love Field in Dallas after ripping off his shirt and screaming obscenities during a TSA screening. Police say 59-year-old Reinhold was taken into custody after he refused to comply. As he was being escorted from a holding area at the airport in cuffs, Reinhold sarcastically greeted reporters.
Thanks for the exposure, guys. Appreciate it. Glad you're here.
This actor was trying to sort of make a point about the TSA the same way that you were. So it's still going on. But you know, you can't, you know, this whole, it's a systemic problem. It's not a problem that can be just fixed by, you know, trying to go to the courts, which is the same people who are all the same people. They're all tied together. So it's interesting that you've kind of just decided, okay, I'm just going to get out of the U.S. and you're there in Puerto Rico. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, so Puerto Rico it's a really interesting situation because it's a territory and not a state. Puerto Rico doesn't have a vote in Congress. They don't have. They have a representative. He's like an advisor or a complainer, but he doesn't actually have a vote. So the doctrine of no taxation without representation comes into play. And so Puerto Rico makes their own tax policy for Puerto Ricans. And for years, this didn't matter because whatever the IRS was stealing from people, Puerto Rico would do the same thing to their people. But then they fell on difficult times economically and figured that they needed to get some productive entrepreneurial types to move to the island. So a number of years ago, they passed a couple acts. Most relevant to my situation is Act 22, which basically states that if you apply to the government and fill out some simple paperwork, they will give you a written 20-year exemption from paying taxes on long or short-term capital gains or on interest or dividends from a Puerto Rican source. The capital gains portion is on your worldwide income, and the interest or dividends is just from Puerto Rican sources. But the only requirements are that you are in Puerto Rico for, they say 183 days. And from my research, it seems that it's not so much that Puerto Rico wants you to be here, but that the IRS wants to make sure that you're not there. So if you, I think you could conceivably spend 3 months in the United States, 4 months in Europe traveling around and 5 months in Puerto Rico, and you'll be within the limits of the law, and your tax exemptions will be valid. And but I'm a surfer, and I'm learning kiteboarding, and I'm a scuba diver, and I love the water, and so for me it was kind of hard to believe. Like, the deal is this: I have to be 6 months in a tropical paradise, and then I don't pay any taxes to the United States. Where do I sign? And
yeah, I know a lot of people have done that. Peter Schiff, I believe, has done that. I think Louis James of KC Research and numerous others that are quite involved in the stock market and have a lot of capital gains, who are American, who don't necessarily or can't get another citizenship, have become residents of Puerto Rico, like yourself.
Yes. Well, and even if you, as an American citizen, if you do have another citizenship, you're still under the U.S. tax net, no matter where you live, unless you renounce. Right. And the U.S. passport is a really good travel document, and there are a lot of great things about the U.S. Still. So, you know, if you're not wanting to give up that citizenship, this is the only break you can get.
Yeah, that's the case. For people who don't know it, the U.S. is one of the only countries in the world that taxes you on worldwide income. So myself as a Canadian, if I'm not living in Canada, I'm a resident somewhere else, I don't have to pay Canadian tax. This is the same for almost everyone in Europe, most countries, almost every country in the world except for the U.S. The U.S., that's why I say at the Dollar Vigilante, the Americans are some of the most financially enslaved people in the world, because you just can't get away from that extortion racket called the IRS, no matter what you do. Well, you can, but you're going to put yourself at a lot of risk, because they will actually come after you. They're a very dangerous gang of thieves. And so that's one of the only options for Americans who don't want to give up their citizenship but do want to get some tax advantages, is, as you said, to go live in a tropical paradise. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've been finding Puerto Rico?
I love it down here. I live in Rincon, which is the Spanish word for corner, because I'm in the northwest corner of the island. There's surf on both sides, depending on which way the wind is blowing. It's always offshore somewhere. The water's 80, 82 degrees all year round. The people are really nice. The food is great. We've got an organic farmers market every Sunday. There's an organic CSA, community supported agriculture program here. So the food is great, and it's very, the air is clean, the water's clean, and it's really pretty tranquil out here. And it's beautiful. There's plantains and bananas and coconuts and mangoes and papaya just literally falling off the trees. And real estate here is really inexpensive for what you get. When I moved here, I bought a one-way ticket, and in 2 weeks I bought a car and a house. And, I did, the things that you're not supposed to do, which is buy the first house that you look at. That's exactly what I did. But, the place I'm in now is 3 units. It's got an ocean view, and it was $84 a square foot. And I'm a 7-minute walk from the water, and I'm doing vacation rentals with my other units, and those are booked up all the time because everybody wants to come here on vacation. One big thing that is a really big difference from the United States is that feeling that you get when you're in the U.S., that they're just waiting for you to screw up so somebody can write you a ticket or arrest you. That does not exist down here. The police actually, when the police drive around, they actually keep their overhead lights on so that you know that they're coming. And whatever
they do the same in Mexico.
Whatever you're doing, you can stop doing it until they drive by. If they're actually, you'll know that you're actually getting pulled over if they turn on the siren. But this has not happened to me yet. And for the most part, unless you're actively messing with somebody, like in the way that we libertarians actually understand aggression. I mean, you're aggressing against someone or their property and causing them physical damage. Unless you're doing something like that, you can do whatever you want here. And that was one of the things that struck me most immediately when I moved here. Was one of the first things I did was go to one of the public beaches, and there were people with their dogs off leash, drinking beer out of glass bottles, with barbecues, and amplified music, and 3 or 4 other things that if you did any one of these things in San Diego, they'd call out the SWAT team, and it would make the evening news. And down here, people take care of business. They generally clean up after themselves. It's not a big deal, and people just there's much more of an atmosphere down here that that this place is here for human beings to live, instead of something that needs to be preserved for the good of the state. So it's much more laid back, and it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds almost identical to here in Acapulco, Mexico. The same thing. The cops really don't. They sometimes will try to rip you off, but you pretty much, if you just say get lost, they'll actually leave. They'll be like, "Oh, you kind of caught me." They'll feel kind of bad about it. It's like, yeah, I need a few bucks, and they drive around with their lights on. And I rarely, if ever, stop for them. I stopped once and told them off, and they ran away, and that's in like 7 years of being around here. And as you said, same thing on the beach, just drinking, whatever, doesn't matter, as long as you're not hurting anybody, which is the way it should be. So it's actually kind of funny that you've left the USSA, the land of the free, because there's really not much freedom there anymore. And in other places there is. And that's one thing that I always try to get across to people is, like even where I live, and you talked about the cost. Where I live here, no one would believe what I pay for what I get. For what I get here, for example, I'm renting this house, which I always do because I'm a perpetual traveler, prior taxpayer. I think it's about $1,500 a month, and it could be in a rap video. It's a mansion basically in the best part of town, and I have a cook, a maid, a driver. They're all about $12 a day. So for about $2,500 a month, I live like, for $2,500 a month in San Francisco, for example, I'd get like a top or bottom bunk bed in a shared room. I'd be making my own macaroni and cheese and trying to, save up to rent a car or something, or get a car. It's just night and day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you pointed out also about you renting out your apartments. That's another thing that I always bring up with people is there's a lot of opportunities in these other places. It's a lot cheaper. So you got that place, you've got some extra units, you're renting them out. So there you go. You got some income. That it's so much easier in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. My property tax here is $700 a year, whereas at my place in San Diego it was I think $1,100 a month.
So you're basically renting.
Also, yeah. Something else that I learned after I moved here is that a federal judge ruled that Obamacare does not apply to the territories. So,
nice. So
you can dodge that as well. My car registration and insurance down here, it's provided by they require that you have it. They require that you have insurance, but there's like 12 different companies that provide it, so they're all competing with each other. So the registration and insurance for a year is $169. I just had to pay it. $169 for a year. Gasoline is about the same price.
$10 a month for insurance.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's about the same price as it is in the States. They actually have 93 octane here instead of 91 in like they had in California. And I think that might be part of the reason why Puerto Rico has such an incredible drag rate. Fastest Evos in the world. I think the fastest Evo in the world. One of my Airbnb guests was just telling me about this. Is down in Ponce. It's called White Lightning or something. It's a 1,000 horsepower Subaru and Mitsubishi. Yeah, there's a big drag racing culture down here because of and I think it might have something to do with the fact that there's really good gasoline down here, and you can race year round because it never snows or anything like that. So it's an interesting place. I'm really enjoying the culture and the people.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, same here for auto insurance. Really cheap. I just paid for mine. It was I think. It's more than what you're paying, but I was still like, it's so much less than what I was paying in Canada. It was about $500 a year, so about $35 a month. It's not really required, but I just get it because it is a new car, and if it gets smashed up, it'd be nice if we didn't lose the entire investment on it. Yeah, it's just, and you brought up property tax. It's more expensive there than here because I know the property tax in this area for this house is probably about $200 or $300 a year, so about $20 a month. And everyone in Acapulco complains about it. They say this is BS. What are we getting for this? Because they actually don't really get anything for it because you pay for the private trash collector, you pay for the private water, they come around with the water trucks and just fill up the tanks. You pay for everything, but it's all fairly cheap, and I actually prefer it. It's all private services. So really the government doesn't really provide much here, which is great, and the services are quite cheap. It's just, so much better. So you're actually going to come to Anarchapulco and you're going to speak at it. So I'm excited to have you come here. It's really cool what you did with the TSA. Is there anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
Well, I've since figured out, and I can share this with the people at Anarchapulco, I've since figured out a number of ways to get around the TSA that don't involve, putting yourself in such a ridiculous situation. I mean, you've probably seen, for example, in your travels, how many people are now traveling with service dogs? Have you seen this? Like dogs that have no business being service animals, puggles and beagles and shih tzus and other, basically, no offense to people who own those dogs, but basically worthless breeds when it comes to actually performing any sort of service. Everyone's traveling with
Chihuahuas. Do they have service Chihuahuas?
Sure. Because if you're traveling with a service animal, you get to go through the metal detector just like in the old days. And they swab your palms to make sure you didn't shove explosives up inside your dog.
I'm gonna get one of those little Red Cross little jackets for my Chihuahua.
Yeah, seriously. That's literally all you have to do. And it's kind of hilarious. But that's just how it is, and people are starting to figure that out. I've come up with a couple other things, and I travel a lot. Probably not quite as much as you do, but pretty close. And I still have never been. I've never done the I surrender pose. I've never been through the scanner. I've been patted down a few times, but not with any regularity. So there are ways. There's always a way to get around whatever the state is trying to impose. And the TSA is one thing. Moving to Puerto Rico and getting this great tax benefit is another. I'm really actually getting excited about Bitcoin now. I've known about it for years, but the light just kind of went on a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, this could be the thing that really shuts them down. So there's always a way, and it's just a question of whether or not you're willing to look for it in expendable effort to be free.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've lived my life by, and I've been into Bitcoin for quite a while as well. And that actually, could totally change the game. We're going to have so many people involved in Bitcoin at Anarchapulco. So a lot of the people at Anarchapulco are all sort of like us. They just find ways and live interesting lives and much better lives in general is what I've found. And so if you're interested in that, check it out. Anarchapulco, February 25th to 28th, 2017. We'll have the links to that down below. I'd like to thank Sam for coming on from Puerto Rico. We'll let him get out and hit the surf. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
How was the conference this year?
Absolutely fantastic.
It's an amazing experience.
The conference is great. It's the best thing I've ever been to, probably in my life, honestly.
It's a blast. It's really fun. There's so many things to do.
Just the spirit, just the energy, amazing moments, amazing people.
It's really, really fun.
It's better than you could expect.
I think it's the best conference I've ever been to.